The night was cold, and the wind carried the smell of rust and dust through the old junkyard. Metal scraps lay piled high like silent mountains, and the dim light from a single hanging lamp swung slowly in the breeze. Ethan Cole was alone, sitting on a wooden crate, his hands working on a broken generator. He was used to being alone, no family, no friends, just the endless company of scrap metal and half-dead machines. He tightened a bolt and sighed. His stomach growled, reminding him that he had not eaten more than bread and beans that day. As he reached for his water bottle, he froze. Somewhere in the shadows, a faint sound whispered through the junkyard. It was soft at first, almost like the wind, but then he heard it again. A small, trembling whimper. Ethan set his tools down quietly, his ears sharpened to the sound. It was not an animal, he could tell. It sounded human, or almost human, curious but cautious. He grabbed a rusty flashlight from the workbench. The beam cut through the darkness, bouncing off twisted sheets of metal and old ship hulls. He followed the sound deeper into the maze of scrap. The wind howled through broken ship doors, making them creak like old ghosts, and then, near a pile of broken cargo crates, he saw them, two small figures, crouched together, their thin bodies shaking from the cold. Their clothes were torn, covered in dust, and their eyes were wide with fear, even in the dim light. Ethan could see they were not human. Their skin had a faint silver-blue glow, like moonlight on water. Strange markings shimmered across their arms and faces. One of them, a girl, clutched the other, a boy, tightly, as if trying to shield him from the world. The boy looked even younger, his breathing quick and shallow. Ethan took a step closer, and the girl hissed softly, baring small, sharp teeth. It was a warning, a frightened animal's defense. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes darted to his hands, then back to his face. For a moment, they didn't move. Ethan noticed how thin they were, their cheeks hollow, their clothes hanging loosely on their frames. They were starving. He slowly pulled a small metal box from his coat, opened it, and revealed a piece of bread and some dried meat. The girl's eyes widened, but she didn't move. Instead, the boy's gaze locked on the food, and his small hand twitched forward. Ethan crouched and set the food down on a clean piece of metal between them. "I'll leave it here," he said. "You can take it." They hesitated for a long second. Then the boy snatched the bread and bit into it hungrily. The girl followed, tearing the meat with her teeth, her eyes never leaving Ethan. As they ate, Ethan looked around. Why were they here, in the middle of the night, hiding in his junkyard? And why did they look like they hadn't eaten in days? The wind shifted, carrying another sound, faint, but enough to make Ethan tense footsteps. He turned his head sharply, scanning the dark edges of the yard, there just beyond the fence. A shadow moved, slow and deliberate. Someone was out there, watching. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He stood quickly, stepping in front of the children. The girl let out a low growl, but Ethan didn't move away. "Stay here," he whispered to them. He moved toward the fence, the flashlight shaking slightly. In his hand, when he reached the edge, he shone the light. Nothing. Just the shapes of scrap metal and broken engines. Still, his gut told him he wasn't alone. He scanned the ground, fresh footprints in the dirt, too large to belong to the children. Whoever it was had been here recently. He turned back to the kids, who were watching him with a mix of fear and confusion. "You can't stay out here," he said firmly. "Come with me." The girl shook her head, clutching the boy tighter. Ethan took a slow breath. "If you stay here, whoever's following you will find you," he said. The boy's eyes widened, and even the girl's expression faltered. Finally, she gave a small nod. Ethan motioned for them to follow. He led them through the winding paths of the junkyard until they reached his workshop. Inside, the air was warmer, lit by the glow of A small heater in the corner, the girl guided the boy to a blanket on the floor, and they sat down together. Ethan handed them each a cup of water. As they drank, Ethan studied them closely. He knew they weren't from any species common in this sector, and something about their markings made him think of old stories. Stories about royal bloodlines. "Do you have names?" he asked quietly. The girl hesitated, then shook her head. Or maybe she just didn't trust him enough yet. Ethan decided not to push. Instead, he stepped away. Checking the door locks and dimming the lights, whoever had been outside could come back, and Ethan had a feeling that tonight was only the beginning. Outside, the wind howled again. Somewhere far off, a ship's engine roared. Fading into the night, inside, Ethan sat down near the heater, watching the two small figures wrapped in the blanket. He didn't know why, but he felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't known in years. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The pale light of morning crept through the gaps in the junkyard walls. Ethan woke early, the cold air biting at his skin. The small heater had burned out during the night, and the workshop was chilled. He looked over to the corner where the two alien children slept under the blanket. They were curled up together, their thin arms wrapped around each other as if afraid someone might pull them apart. Ethan quietly set water to boil on a small burner. He had a little porridge left, enough for one person, but he decided to split it into 3 bowls. When the smell reached the children, the boy's eyes opened first. Then the girls, they sat up slowly, still looking uncertain. The boy accepted the bowl with both hands and began eating quickly. The girl took hers but did not eat right away. She kept glancing toward the door, her eyes full of worry. Ethan noticed the strange markings on her arms again. In the light, they looked like patterns of starlight. Glowing faintly, he wanted to ask where they came from. He knew pressing too hard might scare them. Instead, he asked gently, "How long have you been out there?" The boy kept eating, but the girl answered, her voice low. Many days, her words were slow. As if she wasn't used to speaking his language, Ethan could hear a faint accent, unlike any he had heard before. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl's eyes hardened, and she looked down, saying nothing. Ethan understood some wounds were too deep to open in a single night. He changed the subject, telling them they could stay here until they were safe. The boy paused in his eating and glanced at the girl. It was clear she was the one who made the decisions. Finally, she gave a small nod. Ethan felt relief. But deep down, he knew this would not be simple. Later that morning, Ethan decided to go into town for supplies. His stock of food was almost gone, and the children needed clothes. He told them to stay hidden inside the workshop until he returned. The girl gave no promise, but Ethan hoped she would listen. The town was small, just a cluster of metal buildings surrounded by desert. Ethan kept his head low as he entered the general store. He picked up canned food, warm blankets, and a pair of worn jackets that might fit the children. But as he placed the items on the counter, the store owner leaned closer. "You hear about the bounty hunter?" the man whispered. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What bounty hunter?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Came in last night," the store owner said, glancing toward the door. "Big fellow, scar on his jaw, carrying a holly of 2 kids, alien kind." Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "They say he's paying well for information," the man added. Ethan forced a shrug. "Not my business," he said. Paying quickly and heading for the door, outside, the air felt heavier. He spotted the bounty hunter across the street, tall, armored, scanning a hologram in his hand. From where Ethan stood, he could see it clearly. 2 young aliens, silver blue skin, glowing markings. It was them. Ethan turned away before the bounty hunter could notice him. He took a longer route back to the junkyard, checking over his shoulder every few minutes. When he finally reached the gate, he hurried inside and locked it behind him. The children were still in the workshop, just as he had left them. He placed the food on the table and handed them the jackets. They tried them on. The boy smiling faintly at the warmth. Ethan crouched down, looking into the girl's eyes. "Someone is looking for you," he said quietly. "Someone dangerous." The boy's hands tightened around the jacket. The girl's expression stayed calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "We know," she said simply. Ethan was silent for a moment, then asked, "Why?" The girl glanced at the boy, then back at Ethan. Finally, she spoke. Her words like a slow confession. "We escaped from a ship." "A bad ship," she said. "They hurt people there. They take children." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Slavers?" he asked. She nodded once, her small hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. Ethan felt anger boiling in his chest. He had seen slavers before in the outer system's cruel people who treated life like currency. If the bounty hunter found them, it would not end well. He thought for a moment, then made a decision. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "But if they come, we'll have to run." The boy looked up at him, his eyes wide and uncertain. "Will you keep us safe?" he asked, his voice small. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do everything I can that night." The wind picked up again, rattling loose sheets of metal. Ethan stayed awake, sitting near the door with an old rifle across his lap. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a low humming sound drifted through the air. It was the sound of a small craft searching the night. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. He knew the bounty hunter had not given up, and he also knew that the quiet life he once had was gone forever. Asterisk. The night was darker than usual. Thick clouds covered the moon, and the junkyard was silent except for the soft whistle of the wind. Ethan sat near the door of his workshop, his old rifle resting on his knees. The alien children, Lyra and Kale, were asleep in the corner, their small forms wrapped in blankets. He had not told them, but he knew the bounty hunter was close. The sound of that small craft last night had not been a mistake. Ethan's ears caught something, a faint metallic click. It was the sound of boots stepping on loose scrap. He stood slowly, moving toward the window. Through a gap in the metal wall, he saw a shadow moving between the piles of broken ships. It was large, heavy, deliberate, the bounty hunter. Ethan's heart began to beat harder. He had dealt with dangerous people before, but this was different. This was someone who hunted for a living, someone who never stopped until the job was done. The figure stepped into a patch of weak light from a distant lamp. The hunter was tall, wearing armor that looked worn but strong. A scar ran across his jaw, and his eyes glowed faintly under his helmet. In his hand, he held a hologram Lyra, and Kale's faces flickered in blue light. He scanned the junkyard slowly, as if he could smell where they were hiding. Ethan moved quietly to the children. He crouched and whispered, "Wake up, now." Lyra's eyes snapped open instantly, her instincts sharp. Kale stirred, confused. "Someone's here," Ethan whispered. "Hide, just like I showed you." He guided them to the hidden storage compartment under the floor. It was a cramped space, dark and cold, but it was the safest place in the workshop. Lyra climbed in first, pulling Kale with her. Before Ethan closed the hatch, he looked at them and said, "No matter what you hear, don't come out." Lyra gave a small nod, and then they were gone, the floor panel sliding shut above them. Ethan moved back to the door, his rifle ready. The footsteps were closer now. A shadow passed over the window. Then came a loud knock on the metal door. "Open up," a deep voice called. Rough and commanding. Ethan didn't answer. "I know." "You're in there?" the voice continued. "I just want to look around," Ethan called back. "I'm not selling tonight. Come back tomorrow." There was a pause. Then the sound of heavy boots stepping closer. "I'm not here to buy," the voice said. I'm here to collect." Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice steady. The hunter chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "I think you do." A sudden beam of light swept through the cracks in the wall. The hunter was scanning the inside with a wrist-mounted flashlight. Ethan stepped to the side, avoiding the light. The hunter moved toward the door again, his armor clinking softly. "You're a smart man," he said. "You know what happens if you hide fugitives." Ethan's jaw clenched. He could almost feel the hunter's eyes behind the helmet. "I told you," Ethan said. "You've got the wrong place." There was silence for a moment. Then, without warning, the door rattled violently. The hunter was trying to force it open. Ethan quickly pushed a metal bar into place. "Locking the door from the inside? You really want to? Make this difficult." The hunter growled from outside. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to make the hunter think there was nothing here. It's nothing worth his time. So he shouted, "This is private property. Take your business somewhere else." For a moment, it seemed like the hunter might break the door down. But then the sound of footsteps moved away, slow and deliberate. Ethan stayed still, listening. The junkyard was silent again, but he didn't trust it. He knew hunters. They often circled around, coming from another direction. Sure enough, a faint scraping noise came from the roof. The hunter was climbing, trying to get a better view. Ethan grabbed a long metal rod and banged it hard against the side wall. The noise echoed through the junkyard, making it sound like something big was moving outside. He hoped it would draw the hunter's attention away from the workshop. After a tense minute, the scraping stopped. Ethan risked a glance out the side window. The hunter was standing by the gate now, scanning the junkyard with slow precision. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away into the shadows. Ethan didn't relax. He knew this wasn't over. Hunters never left without a reason. He waited another half hour before opening the hatch to the storage space. Lyra and Kale climbed out, their eyes full of silent questions. "He's gone for now," Ethan said quietly. "But he'll be back." Lyra's jaw tightened. Kale moved closer to Ethan, his small hand gripping Ethan's sleeve. "We need to leave," Ethan said. "This place isn't safe anymore." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of an engine far in the distance. The hunter was out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment. Ethan knew they had only one chance to escape before the trap closed around them completely. The first light of dawn crept over the junkyard, but Ethan was already awake. He had not slept at all. The bounty hunter's visit still burned in his mind, and he knew that staying here meant death or capture. Lyra and Kale sat near the small heater, their eyes fixed on him. They did not ask questions, but they could see the decision in his face. "We leave now," Ethan said simply. No argument came from the children. They trusted him. Even though they had only known him for a short time, Ethan began packing quickly. Cans of food, bottles of water, tools, blankets, and the small rifle. He moved to the far corner of the junkyard where an old ground vehicle sat half buried. In dust, it was a battered hauler, its paint worn away, but its engine still had life. He had been fixing it on and off for months. Not for travel, but for hauling scrap. Now it would have to carry them to safety as he worked, tightening bolts and checking fuel. Lyra and Kale silently helped. They brought small boxes of supplies and strapped them down in the back. Every sound felt too loud in the quiet morning. Ethan kept glancing toward the gate, expecting the hunter's shadow to appear at any moment. Finally, the engine coughed to life, rumbling like a tired old animal. Ethan opened the gate and drove out onto the cracked road that led away from town. He did not take the main trade route. Instead, he turned toward the red wastes. The wastes were dangerous. A stretch of desert where few dared to travel, But that was exactly why Ethan chose it. No bounty hunter would expect them to cross there. The sun rose higher, heating the air until it shimmered. The ground vehicle rattled over uneven sand and Stone Kale sat quietly in the back, holding a canteen of water. Lyra sat beside Ethan, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "How far?" she asked. Ethan kept his gaze forward. 2 days, if we're lucky. Maybe more, by midday. The heat was unbearable. Ethan stopped under the shadow of a jagged rock formation to rest the engine and let the children drink as they ate, dried. Rations, Lyra asked a question that had been silent since the beginning. "Why help us?" She said softly. Ethan looked at her for a moment, then answered, "Because no one else will." They set off again. The road vanished entirely, replaced by a sea of red dust and twisted rocks. Ethan drove carefully, avoiding deep cracks in the ground. But then Lyra stiffened, her eyes narrowing toward the east. Something glinted in the distance, a metallic flash. Ethan followed her gaze. At first it was just a dot against the sky, but then it grew larger. Moving fast, a small craft, low to the ground, the bounty hunter. "Hold on," Ethan said sharply. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the old hauler roaring louder than it ever had. The craft behind them adjusted course, closing the distance. Ethan swerved between rocky outcrops, trying to block the hunter's line of sight. The wind whipped at their faces, the heat mixing with the smell of burning engine oil. The bounty hunter's craft fired a warning shot. A beam of light striking the ground just ahead, sand and rock exploded into the air. Kale ducked low in the back, covering his head. Ethan gritted his teeth, steering into a narrow canyon where the craft would have less room to maneuver inside the canyon. The echoes of the engine and the hunter's pursuit thundered in their ears. Ethan made sharp turns, kicking up clouds of dust to hide their path. Lyra held onto the side rail, her voice steady despite the danger. "He will follow until we stop," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. At the far end of the canyon, the path split into two. Ethan chose the steeper one, climbing up loose rock and sand. The hauler groaned in protest, its engine struggling. Behind them, the craft tried to follow, but the slope slowed it down. Ethan pushed harder, every second counting. Finally, they reached the top. Below them, the hunter's craft was still climbing, but far slower. Ethan spotted an old war route ahead, a path littered with broken metal spikes and deep trenches. He remembered it from years ago, a trap-filled zone meant to stop enemy vehicles. If he could lead the hunter into it, the chase would end. He swerved toward the route, the hauler bouncing violently over the rough terrain. The hunter followed. Closing in again, Ethan gripped the wheel tighter, aiming for a cluster of half-buried explosives that had long since gone inert, or so he thought. When the hauler passed over, nothing happened, but when the hunter's craft followed, one of the mines sparked. A small explosion rocked the ground. Throwing the craft sideways, the hunter fought to control it, but Ethan used the moment to turn sharply behind a ridge, out of sight. For the first time since the chase began, silence. Returned, Ethan slowed the hauler, his hands shaking slightly. Kale peeked over the edge of the hauler. "Is he gone?" he asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He scanned the sky, the rocks, the horizon. Nothing. "We can't stay here," Ethan said at last. "The engine's too hot, but we have to keep moving." Lyra looked at him seriously. "He will come back," she said, her voice certain. Ethan nodded. "I know, but next time, we'll be ready." The hauler rumbled forward again, leaving the ridge behind. The wastes stretched endlessly ahead. They were alive for now, but the hunter was still out there, and Ethan could feel in his bones that this chase was far from over. The sun was low in the sky, turning the red wastes into a glowing sea of fire. Ethan's hauler rattled along the cracked, uneven ground, its engine coughing with every mile. Lyra sat beside him, scanning the horizon while Cale rested in the lock. Back, his small body swaying with the bumps. They had been driving for hours without stopping. Afraid that the bounty hunter might appear again at any moment as the sun dipped lower. Ethan spotted a shadow in the distance, the shape of a structure against the red sky. At first, he thought it might be another rock formation, but as they drew closer, he saw the straight lines of metal walls and the broken frame of a cum tower, an abandoned military outpost. It was half buried in sand. The gates rusted and bent. "This could be a place to rest," Ethan said, his voice low. Lyra studied it for a moment before nodding. "But we must watch the shadows," she said. "Places like this remember the people who died in them." The hauler rolled through the broken gate with a loud creak. Inside, the outpost was quiet. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the empty corridors. They parked near a crumbling storage building, and Ethan told the children to stay. Close, he moved ahead carefully, checking the corners inside the main hall. They found dusty metal bunks, overturned crates, and the faint smell of rusted weapons. A faded flag hung from the wall, its colors almost gone. They decided to use one of the smaller rooms for shelter. Ethan closed the door as best he could, blocking it with an old metal locker. Lyra found a set of ration packs buried in a crate. They were long past their date, but still safe to eat. Cale tore one open eagerly, the smell of warm protein paste filling the air. For the first time since they left the junkyard, they ate until their stomachs were full. After eating, Ethan searched the outpost for anything useful. In a corner room, he found an old transmitter. Its surface was covered in dust, and the screen flickered weakly when he tried to power it on. With some work, it came to life, the static crackling in the small room. He adjusted the settings, trying to send out a short-range distress signal if anyone was friendly in this sector. Maybe they could get help. Lyra appeared in the doorway, watching him. "You are calling someone?" she said, not quite asking. "Yes," Ethan replied, just in case. Her gaze sharpened. "Be careful. Some who answer will not be friends," she warned. Ethan gave a small nod. Knowing she was right, that night they sat in the dim light of a lantern. The air in the outpost was cold, and the wind outside howled against the metal walls. Cale had fallen asleep, curled in a blanket. But Lyra stayed awake, sitting across from Ethan. Her eyes were serious, as if she had been holding something back for too long. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. Ethan leaned forward. "My brother and I. We are not just from any planet," she continued. "We are from the House of Salvor, the royal line of our world." Ethan blinked. "You mean?" "Your royalty." Lyra nodded, her gaze steady. "Our parents were killed when the throne was taken. We were captured, meant to be traded to an enemy world. But we escaped." Ethan let the words sink in. It explained the strange markings on their skin, the glow, the way they carried themselves despite their young age. "It also means the bounty hunter is not just after money," Lyra added. "If he catches us, he will return us to the ones who overthrew our family, and they will kill us." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That won't happen," he said, but even as he spoke, he knew the danger had just doubled. A sudden sound cut through the cold air, the faint hum of an engine. Ethan froze. Lyra's head snapped toward the door. It was too quiet to be the wind too steady. Ethan quickly doused the lantern and moved to the window. Through the cracked glass, he saw a shape moving between the dunes. "Lights low, the bounty hunter's craft. He found us," Lyra whispered. Ethan grabbed the rifle and motioned for her to wake Cale. They moved quickly, blocking the door with more crates. The hum of the craft grew louder, then stopped. Silence fell over the outpost, heavy and tense. Ethan's heart pounded, every muscle ready. Then came the sound of boots on metal. Slow and deliberate, the bounty hunter was inside. His shadow passed across the hallway, long and distorted in the faint moonlight. Ethan waited until the shadow was close, then kicked over a crate, sending it crashing loudly down the hall. The sound echoed, and the hunter turned toward it, his weapon ready. Ethan used the distraction to move the children toward a back door that led to the storage building. But before they could slip through, the hunter's voice filled the hall. Low and taunting, "You can run all you want, but I will take them." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he shoved the children through the doorway and turned to face the hall. The hunter stepped into view, his armor glinting in the faint light. Ethan raised his rifle. The silence shattered as a single shot rang out, echoing through the empty outpost. The gunshot echoed through the abandoned outpost. Dust rained down from the ceiling, drifting through the pale moonlight that cut in from the broken windows. Ethan stood in the hallway, his rifle still warm from the shot. The bounty hunter didn't fall. Instead, the armored figure took one slow step forward, the impact of his boots vibrating through the floor. The shot had hit, but the armor was too strong. Ethan cursed under his breath and backed toward the storage building door. Behind him, Lyra and Kale were already scrambling into the shadows. "Go," Ethan said sharply. "Find the tunnel I told you about." Lyra hesitated, her eyes locked on him. Kale tugged her arm, whispering, "We have to." The bounty hunters' voice cut through the cold air. "You can't win this, old man," he growled. "Give me the children, and I'll let you live." Ethan steadied his rifle again. "I've lived long enough to know you're lying," he replied. The hunter raised his weapon, a sleek blaster with a red targeting light that slid across the walls like a predator's eye. Ethan fired first. Aiming for the gaps in the hunter's armor, the shot struck the joint at the shoulder, making the hunter grunt and stumble. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it bought Ethan a few seconds. He darted backward through the storage building, knocking over shelves and crates to slow the pursuit. The hunter followed, stepping over the debris with calculated movements. Every step brought him closer. Ethan ducked behind a support beam and fired again. This time, the shot hit the hunter's leg, causing him to drop to one knee. But the man was tough. He pushed himself back up, limping but still dangerous. Meanwhile, Lyra and Kale found the hidden tunnel entrance in the corner. It was covered by a loose panel of rusted metal. Kale pulled it away while Lyra glanced over her shoulder. She could hear the battle in the other room, the sharp crack of gunfire, and the heavy thuds of boots. Part of her wanted to run to Ethan, but she knew he was fighting so they could escape. Ethan caught sight of them at the tunnel entrance. "Go," he shouted, firing again. The shot hit the wall near the hunter, showering sparks into the air. Lyra grabbed Kale's hand and crawled into the tunnel. Disappearing into the darkness, Ethan exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and dread. The hunter charged, closing the distance in seconds. Ethan barely rolled out of the way as the armored man swung the butt of his weapon like a hammer. It smashed into the beam where Ethan had been standing. Splintering the metal, Ethan fired point blank, the shot slamming into the hunter's chest. The force pushed the man back a step. But again, the armor saved him. They circled each other in the dim light, the air thick with dust and tension. "You're going to die for them," the hunter said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I've had worse reasons," he replied. The hunter lunged forward. Grabbing the rifle barrel with one armored hand, Ethan tried to pull it free. But the man was stronger. With a twist, the hunter ripped it from his hands and tossed it aside. Ethan staggered back. Reaching for the sidearm at his belt, the hunter advanced, swinging his weapon like a club. Ethan blocked with his arm, pain shooting through him. But he didn't go down. He fired the sidearm into the hunter's visor. The glass cracked, spiderweb lines spreading across it. The hunter roared, slamming Ethan against the wall. For a moment, Ethan's vision blurred, but he forced himself to stay conscious. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small round device, an old stun charge. With a sudden move, he slammed it against the hunter's chest plate, and pressed the trigger. A burst of blue electricity exploded, arcing across the armor. The hunter convulsed. His weapon clattering to the ground, Ethan shoved him away, sending the man crashing into a stack of crates. He didn't wait to see if the hunter got up. He sprinted for the tunnel entrance. He dropped to his knees, sliding into the narrow, dark space. The sound of the hunter's boots echoed behind him. Ethan crawled quickly, the tunnel twisting through the ground like an old scar. The air was damp and smelled of rust. Ahead, he saw a faint light. Lyra and Kale had made it outside. When Ethan emerged from the tunnel, the cold desert air hit him. The children were waiting by a low ridge, their faces pale but determined. "We have to keep moving," Ethan said, from behind. The tunnel shook with the sound of the hunter forcing his way through. They ran, their feet kicking up sand, as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. Far behind them, a muffled roar echoed from the tunnel. The bounty hunter had survived. And he was coming. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. The real fight was still ahead. And the next time, one of them wouldn't walk away. The years had passed slowly for Ethan. 10 long years since that night in the red wastes. 10 years since he had watched Lyra and Kale disappear into the rising sun. The bounty hunter had never returned to his doorstep, but Ethan often wondered. If the children had survived, he had no way of knowing, no way of finding out. All he could do was hope. The junkyard was quieter now. His hair had turned more gray than black. His hands were rougher, slower, but he still worked on broken machines. The same workshop stood, though its walls were rustier. Life had gone back to its lonely rhythm. Until that evening, the air was still. Heavy with the smell of rain, Ethan sat outside on a crate, a half-fixed engine at his feet. He was wiping his hands with an old cloth when a low hum filled the air. At first, he thought it was a storm rolling in. But the sound grew deeper, stronger, until the ground itself trembled. Ethan looked up and froze. A shadow moved across the junkyard, blotting out the fading sun. From above, a massive silver starship descended. Its polished hull reflected the last light of day, glowing like a blade. The ship landed slowly, its engines kicking up clouds of dust that swirled through the yard. Ethan shielded his eyes, his heart pounding. The ramp of the starship lowered with a deep hiss. From the light inside, 2 tall figures emerged. At first, Ethan thought they were strangers, warriors in shining armor. Their movements sharp and sure, but then he saw their faces, the same silver-blue glow. The same markings that once shimmered faintly on small, frightened children. It was them, Lyra, Kale. Ethan whispered, his voice catching in his throat. The two moved quickly down the ramp, and before Ethan could stand, Lyra was in front of him. She pulled off her helmet, revealing long silver hair braided with gold threads. Her eyes were the same as before, only sharper, stronger. Kale followed, taller now, his armor gleaming, a sword strapped to his back. Ethan rose slowly, unsure if this was real or a dream. Lyra smiled, though her voice trembled. "We told you we'd come back," she said. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. Kale stepped forward, his voice deep now. "You saved us when you had nothing. Now we return to give you everything." They moved aside, and Ethan saw what was inside the starship. Crates stacked high, filled with advanced tools, supplies. Even gold and rare minerals, weapons, and shields forged from alien metals, enough to make Ethan wealthier than any man in this sector. But he didn't move toward it. His eyes stayed on them. "You're alive," he said softly, almost to himself. "That's all I ever wanted." Lyra's eyes softened. "You gave us a chance when no one else would." She said. Kale nodded. "You fought for us against a hunter who should have killed you." Ethan chuckled faintly, shaking his head. "I was stubborn back then." Lyra smiled. "You still are." They told him their story, how they had reached an allied world after the escape, how leaders loyal to their family had taken them in and hidden them, how they had trained for years, reclaiming their heritage and building a force strong enough to challenge those who had overthrown. Their parents, now, they were free, not just free, but powerful. And they had never forgotten the man who had made it possible. Kale stepped closer, his voice low. "We want you to come with us," he said. To our homeworld, to live as family. Ethan looked between them. The two children he had once hidden under a workshop floor, now standing as warriors. For a long moment, he said nothing. The junkyard around him seemed smaller, emptier. The idea of leaving it behind no longer felt impossible. Finally, Ethan nodded. "All right," he said quietly. Lyra's face lit up. Kale grinned. The expression reminding Ethan of the small boy who once ate bread in the corner of his workshop. They guided him toward the Starship as he stepped inside. The hum of the engines surrounded him. The smell of the metal was different, cleaner, sharper. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was moving forward instead of standing still. The ramp closed behind them, sealing the junkyard away forever. Lyra looked at him, her voice steady but warm. "We're not running anymore," she said. Kale added. "And you're not alone anymore." The Starship lifted into the darkening sky, its engines roaring as it climbed higher. Below, the junkyard shrank into nothing but a memory. Ahead, the stars opened wide. And somewhere among them, a new home waited.